I call Alfred Ngaro.
Tēnā koe, Minita, o te reo te wiki Māori. Mr. Speaker, it's an honour to be able to speak in the second reading of this bill for the New Zealand flag referendum bill. Mr. Speaker, I have to be honest, when this initially came out, this idea about us heading towards a referendum and even the changing of a flag, my first impression is, well, what's the reason why? What's the purpose? What's the sense that we should be heading in this direction? But Mr. Speaker, I then began to reflect that in 2012 and 2013, there was a consultation process in regards to the Constitution or the forming of a Constitution. And just as been spoken by the previous speaker and speakers about the place of the Tiriti o Waitangi, but also other aspects of what defines us as a nation. In some of those consultations, there was a discussion of some people about the national anthem, that constitutes things that constitute national identity. There was an issue that was raised by some about the flag, as well as other areas. So the Constitution discussion actually began to bring up this question about what defines us as a nation. So, Mr. Speaker, then in going through this process, I began to sort of look into, so where did this begin? This whole idea around the call for a New Zealand flag. Well, this happened some over 40 years ago. And I want to just mention this because there's a thought out there in the public and in the nation that this is simply an idea by our Right Honourable Prime Minister John Key, that he's just thought this up as a great idea. In fact, this has been happening for over many decades previously. So let me just give us an idea about where this has come from. Numerous calls in the last 4 decades for a new flag to be adopted. So Mr. Ball, if he listens, he may be just to have a little bit of education here. 1970, National MP, Minister of Internal Affairs, Alan Haight, also put forward the idea, does this flag represent not only our history and heritage, but is it a reflection of our future? That was actually removed, that didn't have the traction. 1988, Labour MP and Minister of Foreign Affairs, Russell Marshall, also put forward the idea. The thought about the fact is that, look, again, here's the flag, around the issue of national identity and nationhood, should we be reflecting on the idea of a new flag? 1989, the Listener magazine ran a competition for designs. Over 600 entries, Mr. Speaker, 7 finalists, which did include the current flag of 1902. And what was surprising is that that flag only just won by a small majority, a very small majority. And here's what Gordon Campbell, who was the editor of The Listener at that time, who ran the competition, and he said this: despite the result, it was confirmed that it had exploded the myths about New Zealand's devotion to the flag. In 1990 to 2000s, in fact, in February 1992, the late Honourable Matiu Rata, former Minister of Māori Affairs, founder of Mana Motahaki, said this: he called for a redesign to re-establish a national identity. He called for a redesign to be able to look at it this, and here was his point of difference. Even in this House, does this current flag represent our history and our heritage? We've heard arguments of today, yes it does. But then he said this: but does it represent our future in heading into a bicultural nation? At that time, the RSA had a petition of over 10,000 signatories that came to that petition, and they argued again that they did not want to change the flag. Over several of these attempts, the RSA came to a point where they said this: we realise that if this decision is to be made, unlike the other previous 3 flags, then the decision of changing the flag should be via referendum. Should be via referendum. So what are we doing at the moment, Speaker? We are actually talking about the bill which is about having a referendum as well. In 1998, Maria Hassler, Minister of Culture, also talked about and argued in favour of the existing flag, but said it would support a change if it was shown that the will of the people was there for a referendum. Mr. Speaker, this has been going on. 2004, Wellington businessman Lloyd Morrison formed a trust called the NewZealandFlag.com, and the purpose was to ask the question: should we be changing the flag and should be a referendum? There were supporters like Kath Tizard, Keith Quinn, Susan Devoy, a number of them did. Now, we know that they weren't able to get enough to form a referendum. They didn't have enough signatories. But, Mr. Speaker, what I want to say is this. The point I am making out of this is that this issue has been going on for a long time. The idea of changing the flag in regards to reflect our history and our heritage, but most importantly, our future, has been going on for a long time. Mr. Speaker, we've heard speeches in the House that have clearly said this. In the Greens, Russell Norman, he supports a change of the flag. He may not like the process, but he would support a change, as well as others in regards to the Constitution. We know that on the other side, the Honourable Trevor Mallard came into our select committee. Now, he even indicated that he would support a change to the flag. However, what he doesn't like is the process. Mr. Speaker, we know that across the House, the majority, bar New Zealand First, support the change to the flag. The truth of the reality is, the other side won't support it because they aren't the ones who supposedly are the nation builders of the country, describing its identity, are not the ones that are in control of this process. Mr. Speaker, that's the reason why we're heading towards this. Mr. Speaker, I just want to come to a couple of other points. And there was some points that were talking about, Mr. Speaker, people also know that we have the Māori flag, the flag that's flown on Waitangi Day. And the name is just escaping me at the moment. Pina, you might be able to help me there. Tino Rangatiratanga flag, thank you. That's flown and has been acknowledged and recognised. Now, the government allowed for that initiation to be able to happen so that they could have the opportunity so that flag could be flown. So I wanted to rebut some of the comments by Dennis O'Rourke where he said that even Māori support this current flag. I suggest that those comments are not true. I suggest those comments will be rebutted even by other speakers, that this flag that wasn't chosen by referendum, neither by Māori, I would suggest that there are others, like Maturata, who said this current flag of 1902 does not reflect its future. Does not reflect its future. Mr. Speaker, in 1989, the government also approved. Let's talk about the cost. People have been talking about this cost of 26 million. Look, Mr. Speaker, we know the timing of that is quite challenging, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, in 1989, the government took time to acknowledge the fact is that it was in the centennial year of the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi. $20 million, Mr. Speaker, was put aside to acknowledge that. Why? Because it was important in the building and the acknowledging of the shaping of a nation. So, Mr. Speaker, we think that's really important. In fact, when we think about the submitters, there were only 113 of those submitters that considered the referendum process to be too expensive. Mr. Speaker, the government considers that to have a process which is legitimate and democratic, and for the outcome to endure, it is important to do it properly, and it is via referendum. We've heard again, this is that the nation may choose, not that the government, but that the nation may choose as well. Mr. Speaker, I just want to make a couple of comments that have come out in regards from the Honourable Trevor Mallard, where he named the committee on the National Party members and talked about the democratic process of having oral submissions. In fact, he talked about 740 oral submissions. Mr. Speaker, it's true to say this, that those came out of formed submissions. It is a standard process and protocol, Mr. Speaker, that those formed submissions, however form that they take, are often collated to be as one submission held into the Select Committee, Mr. Speaker. So we did not believe that we were denying any rights whatsoever for others to be able to do that. Mr. Speaker, there were many submitters who had actually submitted, Mr. Speaker, and actually took the time. In fact, there were 259 submissions. 27 chose to make an oral submission. Mr. Speaker, it would not have taken much for those 740 people to be able to have written something quite different, not a form submission, to indicate their right and their willingness to come and submit before the committee. They did not do that, Mr. Speaker. It was a form submission. Mr. Speaker, I just want to finish on the last comments that I think are really important. Mr. Speaker, there was a comment again by the Honourable Trevor Mallard that talked about that in the cross-party group that there was a unanimous bar the government at that time towards a one referendum. Mr. Speaker, that was contested. I can say that that was contested, Mr. Speaker, that even from the Māori Party, that they had agreed and do agree with the process that the government is taking. Mr. Speaker, it's wrong to be able to indicate that it was only the government willing to take this process of a two referendum. We believe that this process is important. Mr. Speaker, I look forward to the committee stages, but most important, Mr. Speaker, I actually look forward to the process of going out into those RSAs, as I have been. I'm a member of the Te Aratu RSA, and to be able to talk continually about the importance and the role that this referendum has to the shaping of our nation and the changing potentially of the flag. Whatever the nation chooses, Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, is what we will all also abide with. Mr. Speaker, I commit this bill to the House.
Karanga a hau pini haru, henare, sorry.